Hello, welcome to the Angular add-ons topic tutorial. Today we are going to talk about very important topic of Angular, which is dependency injection. I want to cover this topic from long time. So covering everything about the dependency injection in a single video, it's not simply possible. So we are going to split it into the smaller videos so we can talk in detail what exactly is a dependency injection and how we can how we can use it at the base level. There are so many things to be covered in this, like what is dependency injection, how the injector work, what are the hierarchy of the injector, how the dependency resolution works. So there are multiple topics to cover. So without doing any further ado, let's get started. What is a dependency injection is? So to know that, we can open the Angular documentation, and if we search for dependency injection, this is the definition we get from Angular documentation. So DI is a design pattern in which class requests dependencies from external sources rather than creating them. Well, that's great, but what exactly it means? So it simply means if class is depend on some dependency, so instead of creating the object of that dependency themselves of the class, it require that dependency from the some external source. So but what exactly it means for us as an Angular developer? So let's check it. I'm sure that you have seen this kind of code. If you're an Angular developer, like we wrote some services and we inject those services inside the constructor. But let's say just forget about how we inject the services in constructor. But if you want to create an object of service, this will be the traditional way to create an object of this service. So let's say we have the logger service and that we want to use inside the default component, that when we create the project, that is an app component. So how we can do that is like we can create a logger service object into the constructor and we can simply use it. But this code is also going to work. So what is the problem with this code? The issue is with it's like the dependency of our logger service, it is hard coded here actually. That means this component is simply depend on the logger service, which is a hard bounded. So this is not at all like a decouple code. So if you want to decouple this code, so if we need to be like inject something other than the logger service as a logger, we can do it in the like a runtime. So these things also comes into picture, like when we do the testing, so we can stub the logger service, we can like mock these things and inject that whenever we want. So this is not how we write the code in Angular. I'm sure no one is right like creating the logger service by the like hard coded object creation. So how we do it, we inject the logger service inside the constructor. So we are saying that private logger, and which is a logger service type. So whenever this code get executed, it just simply inject the logger service inside this app component. But what exactly is happening? Who is providing this object actually? What magic Angular is doing? So let's see who is the responsible for injection. So what happen when our this code get run? Angular know there is one guy which can be responsible for providing this dependencies. So this is an injector. So injector is simply like responsible for creating a class instance and inject those into the constructor. So whenever you just inject the any dependency into the constructor, so injector create the object for us and that get provided inside the component. So this is how Angular provide the dependencies actually. So this injector get instantiated, like injector class get instantiated when our Angular application get bootstrapped. So we are going to write a simple code for injector which can take the dependency as from the providers and just try to inject inside the class. So let's open our Visual Studio Code and get started with some coding. We are inside the VS Code. Now we are going to create some pseudocode for the injector, how it can look like, and how we will understand like how Angular is can inject the dependencies. So let's get started with that. I'm just creating a new file here, and we will try to create the same logger service. So let's say we have class logger service. This simply has one method, log method, which can take a message as a string and which can just simply console dot that message, let's say logger, and msg. So this is our simple logger service. We just console log the message. So let's say we have the component. This is component class. So instead of using all the template and styles, I will just focus on the class here. So this is our component class now, and we are going to inject our logger service in this component class. So how we can inject is like private, let's say logger, and that logger is a logger service type. So this is how we inject the normally dependency inside the component for any services. Now we know like injector is responsible for creating the object of this dependency and providing it into the component. So let's try to create the injector for us. So let's say we have class which is injector. Now this class can have some of the methods. Let's say we have the get method to get the dependencies whenever we require. This get method takes simple service which can be type of any, because we can provide any type of service as a dependency. So let's say we have service. When we say service get method, so normally our services instance gets shared. So most of the times, like if it's a default injector, our service uses singleton design pattern. So that means if the we have the already instance available, that service injector will provide that instance. If not, it will try to create the new instance for it. So that means like simple instance, it gets shared throughout the application if it's a root injector. We are going to say, talk about like what are the type of injector and how this object gets shared and what are the hierarchy for that. But right now just understand, if the object gets shared, so let's say we have the service instance for that. So before that the instance get shared, so that means we need to store these instances of services somewhere. So let's say we can say that is a container to store these instances, which is a private property, a container, and that container is just a simple instance of map. If you don't know what is map, it's just same as an object, but there are a couple of difference in that. One is like it will give guarantee to preserve the order of key, and other is like the key can be anything literally means like it can be the class, it can be the boolean, or it can be anything. So this is, that's why we are using the key like a map here. So we will say like when we want to get the instance, so simply we will check the instance from this container and we will retrieve that. The key will be the service that get provided here. So if there is no service instance, so we will simply try to throw the error which is like no provider found. So throw error, let's say no provider found. here. If that's not the case, we will return the service instance. So this is how our get method can look like actually. So this method will give us an instance of service if that pro already there. If not, it will try to throw the error. So right now in this case, we will always get the error thrown because there is no service like instance found for any of the service. So what we need to do is in the constructor of injector, we should instantiate the instance of these services. So if the constructor can get argument as a provider, and so if you remember, whenever we want to provide any dependency, we have the providers array available inside like ng module component, or even there is like a possibility we can have platform modules in min.ts. So if you want to provide any dependency, we need to specify the it inside the providers, unless and until we are saying like a service is injectable provided in the root. So that means this constructor take the providers. So let's say which is any array. So it can be anything, but it's an array. Let's say initialize with the blank empty array. Now, once we get these providers, we will use the for each and try to create an instance of that service and save this inside the container. So in the constructor, we will just at the constructor level, we will set this instance. The key should be the service that provider, and that's why we use the map. So key can be anything, and we want to create the instance of the service. So with these things, all the instance of the services get stored inside the container, and when we use the get method, it will simply return the instance which is available. Now let's say how we can use this actually. So our usage can be, first thing, when Angular run the application, it create the injector instance. So that taken care by the Angular. So it is an insider call of Angular. So it create the instance, and when it create the instance of injector, it find out all the providers available and try to give it as an argument to the constructor. So let's say right now we want to provide the logger service here. So this is how we can provide the logger service. When component get instantiated, so we will get the component equal to new, we will get the instance of component, let's say that, and in that component whatever we are injecting with that injector inject those dependencies. So here we want to get the logger service. So this is how Angular do it similar kind of stuff for us when we inject something inside the constructor. So let's say now we can use this logger service here, component dot logger dot, let's say log, and we can say injection is awesome. This is a private, so public. So by this way we get the we get the all the services injected, and that instance get provided by the injector. So this everything can be done by the Angular itself. We don't need to do that, but this is a similar kind of code that Angular can have. So let's say we remove this logger service now. So if we haven't provided this logger service to the injector, so we cannot find this service, and this is like we get the error no provider found. So you might have seen this type of similar error if you forget to provide the services or maybe dependency in the providers array. So this way you will understand now like how the Angular might have uh, written the code inside that. If you want to check the code, there is a code available like for injector in the Angular repository. So you can check like there is also like get method similar to this, but not this. There are so much lot many things it does, but we can understand now how this work and how these matches happen inside the Angular. So I hope just looking at this you will get the better idea like what is dependency injection, why it's important, and how does it works in a details actually. In some coming videos we are going to talk about like injector hierarchy, then injection resolutions, and there are a lot many things to be covered. So stay tuned, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe that, because we are going to talk about the Angular advanced topic. So thank you for watching. See you in the next video.